Hey there, it's Lauren with Rustic Honey, and today I invite you into my farmhouse kitchen as we freshen up the menu for the new season. We're making a little bit of everything today as we prep for a new baby and a busy baseball schedule this spring, so join us as we get into the kitchen. Alright guys, welcome back to my kitchen this week. I thought we would just go through some things I've been making, and we're starting here on Sunday evening, so I've got all the lights on in the kitchen and it's just kind of a cozy evening here. I have been resting most of the day and it has been a rainy weekend, which we have so enjoyed. And Dan took the kids to do a little bit of fishing because it's just the opportune time. So the house is quiet, and I thought, honestly, I thought I would just sit on the couch and do nothing but maybe binge Netflix or something, but I finally made myself get up for a little while here and just get prepped for the week. I had to make a few things to get us going on our meal plan. I know I had said this in a recent video, but I haven't been excited to cook lately or meal plan, but it seems like once I just have a plan and start executing it, then I feel a little bit better about it. Like once I'm in the kitchen, I actually enjoy it. So sometimes getting started is the hardest part. Here I'm just throwing together our favorite all-purpose seasoning. We call it Bill's seasoning, and I've laughed about this so many times, but it was somebody's like cookbook that came from a church somewhere that got hand-me-downed, and now it's just in itself, it's just Bill's seasoning. And we've kind of changed it up a little bit over the years to make it our own, but we still call it Bill's, and I don't know who Bill is, but it's a really good all-purpose grilling seasoning. I'll be sure to share the recipe in the description box below, but we hardly ever run out of this, and the minute that we do, we make another batch of it because it's just so handy to have around, especially as we head into the spring season and the summer where we'll be outside grilling more often, and especially with having a baby very soon, I know I'm going to be sending Dan out to man the grill even more often so that I don't have to cook dinner. So here I am just filling an empty Parmesan container. That seems to be like the signature container that we have always kept our Bill's seasoning in ever since we were married. I feel like my husband and I have always had something like this in the cabinet. So I'm just using a little funnel there to get that filled up, and one batch fits almost perfectly inside of this container. So I was a little short on salt and I ran out of cornstarch, but I'm just, as you saw, I was kind of loosely measuring, and it still turns out great every single time. So I'll be sure to share that in the description box with you guys if you're interested in trying the seasoning. And one little quick tip to make your life easier: if you order groceries like I do, you can scan the barcodes of things before you throw them away and add them to your cart for later. Because if you have a mom brain like I do, you will forget with like what you were out of, especially if it's cornstarch and salt. I just don't think of those things when I go to make my weekly like run to the grocery store. So I always constantly, as I run out of things, try to scan it into my app, and then I'm ready to go. Or at least I have like a list then. All right, now moving on, I wanted to again prep a few more things for the week, so I'm gonna make some homemade granola. I know you guys have seen in recent videos, I'm really into eating like a yogurt parfait in the morning, and I oftentimes will buy a big bag of the protein granola, which I love. I can link the one that I really like. It's a Nature Valley brand, I think. But it does get expensive, and my family, it turns out that they love it too. I was really hoping the kids would continue on their like Cheerios thing for a while, but no, they have great taste and they would really like to have granola on top of their yogurt too. So I'm taking advantage of the quiet evening at home because I had been wanting to try to make my own protein granola. So I looked at a couple different recipes on Pinterest. I will link the one that's the closest to what I've done here, but I did kind of change it up a little bit on my own too. And leave me a note in the comments below if you've seen one of those little gadgets that I used for the pecans there. My mom has always had one of those, and I found one years ago at a garage sale, and it is one of my favorite like little vintage finds. Love it. So sorry, back to granola. So we're doing oats, we're doing honey. I'm using coconut oil in mine, a little vanilla, the protein powder to give it the protein factor, of course, and then the pecans. So, or pecans, depending on where you come from, how you say it. I say pecans, you probably say pecans. And then lastly, to sweeten it up, I'm using my local honey, which is down to the bottom of the jar, and it is getting quite crystallized. And one thing, I'll actually share a tip with you here pretty soon about that, but in the meantime, let's get the coconut oil melted just a little bit so that this can come together. I'm going to use an egg white, and that's going to help kind of create little clusters as it bakes. And we're going to set aside our egg yolk for our next project. So I didn't quite fully melt the oil, but it's going to come together just fine. We're going to mix this, and I put a little cinnamon in here too. I don't know if I mentioned that, but again, I will link all of these things below or write the recipe out in the description box so that you have that. And then I'm going to line a baking sheet to make life easier as always and start the oven. And I think I put it at about 325, and we did this for about 20 minutes. And I think it turned out so good. So we're going to bake it for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to flip it around and then bake it another 10 minutes. All right, so again, always working within the little pockets of time that I have, I thought I would use this egg yolk to make a little batch of mayo to use for some sandwiches this week. I usually use a whole egg, but the egg yolk is going to work just fine here. So I'm adding a little bit of Dijon mustard, vinegar, lemon juice. I wanted to really concoct a recipe of my own that felt like I always had the ingredients on hand for. So it does take me a few minutes to make the mayo, but I really enjoyed having fresh homemade mayo and honestly not having to spend upwards of like $6 or $7 on a jar of mayo these days. That's not very good for you. So I thought you might as well make one with simple ingredients at home. And I feel like the key ingredient to making mayo at home is to have an immersion blender. If you make it without, definitely give me your tips below in the comments. I would love to know, but the immersion blender to me is the easiest way. And you have to make sure that you do not break your yolk before you start the process, because there's something about that first 10 seconds just holding it right over the yolk is the key to making it, like actually getting it to come together. So we can share more about mayo in another video if you would like to know more about that. But here I am just kind of moving around those clusters. They're smelling so good. It's almost like a deconstructed oatmeal cookie at this point. It's smelling glorious. Okay, and while that finishes up, I decided I would go ahead and throw in a big beef arm roast that I just pulled out of the freezer. I'm wanting to make some sandwiches tomorrow for lunch because the kids will be home on a Monday from school. And I thought I'll just make a double batch. Since I'm going to make a whole roast, I'll make a double batch and stick the other one in the freezer, because why not have another freezer meal with a baby on the way? I'm sure if you've been hanging out with me for any amount of time, you're probably thinking, when is this woman going to actually have a baby? And I wish I knew the answer. I'm still waiting, but any day now as I'm filming this and recording for you. By the time you're watching this video, I will no longer be pregnant, that's for sure, but I do appreciate all of your prayers and well wishes in the comments. You guys have been so sweet over this entire pregnancy, and I'm excited to share with you this little new addition to our family. For that roast, I just put it into my Instant Pot, and I'm setting it for slow cook for 10 hours, and then I'm going to let it keep warm overnight, and it'll be perfect in the morning. I can pull it apart and get ready for sandwiches for the day. I like to just have things like this prepped and done ahead. The main thing I added, I was kind of, again, winging it. I added Bill's seasoning that you saw me make earlier to the top with some cracked black pepper, and then I did Worcestershire sauce, soy sauce, liquid smoke, and a little bit of root beer. So that's a wrap on my roast, and it is set for the night. The only thing left to do is munch on the granola while I load the dishwasher. And the hardest part here was not eating all of the fresh granola. Even before it cooled, it was delicious. It also made our house smell so nice, so when the kids came back, I was also trying to fight them off of eating it all. As it cooled though, it did crisp up, and I put it in a mason jar, and it'll be ready for breakfast in the morning. We're back in the kitchen this morning to check on the roast. It's going to be a busy morning. The kids are all at home, and I have my hopefully final doctor's appointment before this baby this morning, and I know I'm going to be gone for a while, so I wanted to make sure that everything is as prepped as possible for lunch when I return. And of course, I want to get a quick breakfast on the table before I have to leave. So I'm pulling the roast out of my Instant Pot. I still, for some reason, my Instant Pot slow cooker feature, I swear, does not slow cook my roasts quite as well as my actual crock pot does. I don't mind it for some things, but I mean, it's still pulled apart nicely, but I feel like if I would have done this in my regular crock pot, it would have just completely fallen apart. So I don't know why, but the pressure cooker itself is fantastic. I love my Instant Pot, don't get me wrong, but that was something I did have to work a little bit more to shred up the meat, and I just put it back in the juices to keep warm until I need it later today for lunch. All right, so now it's time to prep a little bit of breakfast for everybody. My oldest was up first, and he got his yogurt put together in this mason jar. So I'm just adding some strawberries, the homemade protein granola, and the honey to the top of that. Now I'm going to make myself a parfait before it's about time for me to leave for my appointment. Sometimes I'll even add protein powder to the yogurt too if you really are trying to get your protein up for the day. I feel like that's a great way to add it in. And I was going to share with you the honey because it's so crystallized in my jar. You can see back there. The best thing that you can do is to sit it in your car windshield when it's really warm outside for the day. And that sounds weird, but like just pop the lid on it and sit it in the car in the driveway and it will not be crystallized anymore. So I need to do that and it'll be like good as new in a couple hours. Of course you can heat it or sit it in warm water. There's other ways to do it, but the car trick was pretty cool and worked really well. So as is life, my appointments all ran a little bit behind this morning, so I didn't make it back to make lunch for everybody as early as I wanted to. So I called Dan, and they actually had caught fish yesterday, so he got that worked up for lunch, and it was the most glorious treat when I got back. And all the kids, of course, were satisfied with a little fried fish for lunch, and nothing says it's spring, summertime like fried fish. I think that's always a treat that we look forward to. So now I'm just going to go ahead and work on these sandwiches, but the good news is I can just freeze both of them now since we didn't need one for lunch today, and I'm not on a time crunch this way. So I'm going to go ahead and slice up some onions. I'm going to use that roast that we made, and I'm going to make a kind of Philly cheesesteak slider sandwiches to stick in the freezer. We're going to go ahead and start getting our onions and some bell peppers in my cast iron skillet to cook them down, caramelize them just a little bit, and have them ready for the top of our sandwich. My mother-in-law had given me recently this big bag of bell peppers that she still had from last summer's garden. And so I think we're all trying to get to the bottom of what's in the freezer from the garden last year and use all those things up as the weather is changing. And, spring is upon us. We're looking forward to new, fresh veggies from the garden, but it is so glorious to still be able to pull things out of our freezer that we preserved from last year. So while I let those cook down just a little bit, I'm going to get my rolls ready. And the easiest thing for me to do this week was to just buy some Hawaiian rolls from the store. So that's what I did. And I'm just giving these a slice all along the side to take the tops off all at once. And then I'm going to place these in my pans so that it'll be ready for the freezer as soon as we're done. This roast had such great flavor. It was hard to not want to eat it all at once already, but I just strained off the liquid as I went because I really don't want those juices to seep into my rolls. I don't know why. Nothing irritates me more with slider sandwiches. If the whole bottom is soggy, it's just, I'm out. I can't take it. So I wanted to make sure that I strained off most of that liquid. And if you're eating these right away, you could reserve that liquid and have this sandwich with the liquid as more of like a French dip sandwich. That would be delicious. Or you could, of course, freeze it. And another thing I'll say about the meat is if you don't want to do a roast or you're really short on time, if you're in the middle of baseball season like we are about to be, I've even went to the deli and just get like fresh sliced roast beef or some other kind of meat like that and use it in a Philly cheesesteak like this. And it's really delicious once you put those peppers and the onions and stuff on it. And then of course cover it with a bunch of cheese. So that would be a really, really quick dinner. If you don't have time to do the roast ahead of time, just get some deli meat and make sandwiches like this. And it's so yummy. So I'm adding provolone cheese and Swiss cheese to the top of these. They were both on sale this week. So I thought, why not make them extra cheesy and add all of this on here and stick these in the freezer for another day when we are short on time or running out the door for baseball. I don't know about you guys, but it has become, I know our family's getting bigger, but it has become so hard to eat out for a decent amount of money. I mean, I could spend almost over half of at least what we spend on groceries in one meal eating out with my family. And that's like fast food. That's not even like a restaurant. We've decided we might as well go to a restaurant because we get way more food and way better service, way better quality for like the same amount of money that we do on fast food these days. But we're really trying to stay away from that and pack our lunches and eat before we head to the games because it's going to save us a lot of money in the long run. Now, the sandwiches are looking delicious as they are. And as you saw, I used some of the homemade mayo on the inside. I thought that might add a little bit of an extra creaminess once these are baked. But to make these extra delicious, I am doing that topping that often goes on top of sliders. It's butter, Worcestershire, Dijon mustard, and brown sugar. And it's just that nice little caramelization that happens over the top of these as they're baked. That's so delicious. So it's obviously got lots of butter in it. So don't come at me for all all the fat content in this meal, but it is delicious. So we are doing that on both of these. And then we're going to let these cool down a little bit, of course, before we head to the freezer with them. So I'm just going to get them prepped, make sure I get every last little bit of that brown sugar on top because it's going to be so yummy. If you were going to bake these right away, I would just cover it gently with a little bit of foil and bake for about 20 minutes and then uncovered for another 5 or until they're bubbling. But if from frozen, I'm probably going to let them thaw a little bit and then stick them in the oven covered for quite a while, maybe 30 minutes, then pull that lid off for probably another 10. I usually just eyeball it. I really don't. I feel like everybody's oven is different, but freezer meals are never as planned. They always take longer than I think they're going to actually come to temp, but I am so looking forward to adding those to our stash. Now I've had, of course, a little bit of a sweet tooth, and I don't know where this inspiration came from. Honestly, I can't remember. I think I was scrolling Pinterest and someone was doing cake pops, and I thought, well, I wanted to have some cake pops. So I thought I would just include that this week and share with you guys what I'm working on. So we're just throwing in a strawberry cake mix because nothing says springtime to me for some reason than like strawberry cake. Now I've greased my 9x13 with some coconut oil, and I am going to bake this strawberry cake for the minimum amount of time and just until a toothpick runs clean because I want it to stay extra moist so that it can form those little cake pops a little bit easier. I did see someone on, I don't know if it was Reels or Pinterest, that suggested that you wouldn't have to add icing to the cake if you start blending it while it's still hot. So as you can see, this cake, it was fresh out of the oven here, and I obviously didn't do a very good job of like making it level, which is fine. Or maybe my oven is a little uneven. I don't know, but it didn't really matter for this. I wasn't going for aesthetics here, but I'm just going to throw this right into my KitchenAid mixer with the paddle attachment and see if we can get this to come together just with the steam from the cake and if it'll hold together. And I don't know what it is about the strawberry cake. It's giving me girl vibes. We don't know whether or not we're having a boy or a girl, but maybe this is giving off a vibe. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if you have a guess, boy or girl. So whenever these came together, they did hold together. They kept their shape okay, but they just didn't quite hold tight enough to the point where I felt like they were going to hold up once I put the candy coating on. So I thought, let's make a quick little icing. It's just going to make them all the more delicious. Anyway, so I melted some butter. I added in I think I did a half a stick of butter, and then I did about a cup of powdered sugar, a little bit of vanilla, and a splash of milk to get just the right consistency. So it's a little bit of a thicker glaze, if you will. That's just kind of a quick glaze that I often do for baked goods. And this is going to work as a little bit of a binding agent just to make sure that our balls hold together so that we can get them coated in the white chocolate here in a minute. So I'm going to form these all into the balls using a melon baller and then put them on some parchment paper, and we're going to flash freeze them just to let them not flash freeze like completely, but just let them chill in the freezer while I work on some other things. So that way they'll really be ready for dipping in the chocolate. Now, if you get inspired and you want to make cake pops too, I would advise you to grab a full-size cookie sheet. I just grabbed my little half sheet here and covered it in parchment paper, but later on you'll see why I probably should have used a bigger sheet. But the one box of cake mix went way further than I thought it would for these, and I just kind of ran out of room after a while. With it being spring and having the windows open, I'm kind of just trying to enjoy the days of still turning the oven on. I love baking. You guys know that if you've been hanging out with me for a while. But before I know it, these mild spring days are going to turn into scorching afternoons where you don't want to turn on the oven for any reason at all. So I honestly thought, since this made so many cake pops, I'm probably going to put them in the freezer, and they will be a welcome treat later on when it gets warm out and we don't want to turn on the oven, but we still want something that feels like a fresh baked treat. So these will be perfect for that as well. All right, and now these have been sitting in the freezer for just a little while, and I have my almond bark melted. As you may have saw, I used half of that big almond bark but I probably should have used more like 3/4 because I didn't quite get through all of these without running out to where they were starting. I wasn't able to get the coating as thick. So when in doubt, always melt more chocolate. So I'm just doing the white chocolate almond bark on these, and then we're gonna do a little bit of a drizzle on top. And then I have some of those leftover unicorn sprinkles from Reese's birthday. Again, totally giving girl vibes here. There is a little bit of blue in here, so we're trying to play fair here. But Reese is going to help me put some sparkles on these, and then we're going to let them set up. And as you can see, I had them a little too close, so of course, you know what's going to happen. They're going to set up, and then when you pull them apart, it's going to kind of make them look ugly. So there's a few that don't look as good as the others, but they're still delicious for sure. And we're going to end our night with another win from my husband. He took over for dinner and did some chicken on the grill, baked potatoes, and then we had some asparagus too. So quite the perfect meal to a spring day. I'm so glad you decided to join me in my spring kitchen today. Let me know what you look forward to making in the spring in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. And if you're new here, I would love it if you would join us more often and hit that subscribe button. I enjoy making videos like this with rustic recipes. I also share farmhouse decor and of course our farm life along the way. I hope to see you back here again very soon.